Hello everybody, it's a pleasure for me to be here and to share some information about the bone conduction, hearing devices and bone conduction in general. My name is Peter Grasso, I'm Head of Clinical Support here at MED-EL for the bone bridge, for the Vibrant Sound Bridge and for the Adhere device. So we are going to talk about bone conduction in general. Then we will do device comparisons. What is out there in the market, how is it working, and how is it providing help for patients to have a better hearing. And at the end I will dig into details about the bone bridge. So let's start. Everybody knows how air conduction works. It's a conduction of sound waves to the inner ear through the external auditory canal and the middle ear. So what the anatomy is doing is to convert compression and rarefaction in air into vibrations of the middle ear. These vibrations of the ossicles are then transmitted into the inner ear, and from there it's converted to a sound which is propagated in fluid and is stimulating the basilar membrane. The basilar membrane has the task to convert this signal into an electrical signal which then can be interpreted by the brain. So this procedure plays a major role in normal hearing. It's completely different when we talk about bone conduction. How does bone conduction really work? It's a very complex and very interesting topic, and I hope that this presentation will trigger in you the will to learn more about it, to go into research and to discover much more about this topic. There are many factors which will contribute to bone conduction hearing, but one of the most important one is the inertial mass of the cochlear fluids. What is that exactly? So if we think that the brain is a mass, maybe has 15 kilos of weight, and there is a spring which is connected to a much smaller mass which is representing the cochlea and the cochlear fluids, for example. So if the brain moves, if we apply some force to the brain, thanks to the spring, which would simulate the bone and the tissue in between the surface of the skull and the cochlea, there will be some interaction. And the mass of the cochlea will somehow move and be stimulated by that. And that's the inertial mass which will create the basilar membrane to move. In addition to that, there is also inertial mass of the ossicular chain. Not in every patient the ossicular chain is present. If they have been operated on, that's probably in some cases would not be. But if the patient has an ossicular chain and it's mobile, this inertial mass will of course contribute to the sound impression the patient gets. Why? Because, like we know from acoustic air conduction hearing, the ossicular chain is transporting information to the cochlea as well. So due to the fact that the inertial mass of the ossicular chain is there and is contributing to bone conduction, we will have a contribution from that. In addition, the external auditory canal will convert sound coming from the bone to an acoustic information which is irradiated into the external auditory canal, will touch the tympanic membrane and will of course again stimulate the ossicular chain and therefore also the cochlea if the ossicular chain is mobile. Then of course the CSF, the cerebrospinal fluid, will contribute as well, because there will be vibration directly to the brain, let's say like that, to the CSF, and this will also, as it is in contact with the cochlea, will also contribute to a sound impression through due to bone conduction. And then of course there are some other components which are not so important but still play a small role, like the inner ear compression and expansion of the cochlea. So if you would like to see a model of how bone conduction works, I would suggest to look into a publication which is the one of Stefan Stenfeld, who is currently researching a lot and into that direction, and one of his papers, Acoustic and Physiological Aspects of Bone Conduction Hearing, is very, very interesting to read. So I recommend you to read all of his publications, but especially this one. So, and he's showing what we have seen before. So how the energy, the bone conduction energy, will be then transferred to the inner ear through different pathways and contribute to a sound impression, to a stimulation of the basilar membrane, and therefore a stimulation of the brain. Okay, another very important fact to notice and to discuss is that the sound travels in bone in a completely different way than in air. We know that the speed of sound in air is approximately 331 meters per second. The skull bone is transferring sound in a much more efficient way and much faster. So we reach 4,080 meters per second. This is a huge difference if you look at sound. So also regarding delays, for example, between one ear and the other ear, this is different if we are conducting sound through air or through bone or through soft tissue and water. So I would like to provide you with a brief history of bone conduction. Bone conduction hearing has been recognized since ancient times. Girolamo Cardano, who is an Italian researcher during the Renaissance period, demonstrated a method of sound transmission to the ear by the means of a rod or a shaft or a spear held between one's teeth. And he discovered that actually there is a sound impression if this rod or shaft or spear is moving accordingly to a sound signal. Then, of course, you all know that in Beethoven, according to folklore, continued to compose music even if he had a bilateral conductive hearing loss, using a tuning fork which was held between his teeth and connected to the piano. And this gave him the possibility to still hear music very well. Probably his inner ear was not affected too much, and therefore he could continue to appreciate the sound quality of the music, which is, through bone conduction, is very, very good. So bone conduction vibrators have been developed in the early 20th centuries, following the development of the carbon microphone. So the development of the microphone itself has contributed a lot to bone conductor vibrators. In the mid-1960s, Professor Brennemark of Sweden coined the term osseointegration, and this was another very important milestone. He did that in animals and observed that some material were osseointegrating with the bone. And this gave the way to the development of bone conduction devices, implants, which were integrated into the skull. This was successfully applied initially in dentistry, wherein titanium implants have been used for the retention of dentures, and later on in joint reconstruction. But this osseointegration was successful, and sequentially it formed the basis for the development of these bone-anchored hearing aids. The first BAHA, bone-anchored hearing aid, device was implanted by Anders Tillström, and it became commercially available in 1987. And the initial design was improved for marketing by Entific Corporation, and when Entific was acquired by Cochlear, the acronym BAHA was converted into a full-fledged trademark. The concept of transcutaneous bone conduction implant was developed by Professor Hackinson at Chalmers University of Technology in Göteborg, Sweden. Currently, for companies across the world marketing the bone conduction hearing implants, Cochlear BAHA 3 system, 5 system, Oticon Ponto, Ponto Plus, Medel, BoneBridge Sofono, Otomac, and so on. These are devices which were available now on the market. So bone conduction is not only used for to provide a hearing impression, but there are some different applications which are commercially available, which are not medical devices, like headphones, for example. For sports, swimming. It's much easier to develop a hearing or a headphone which works through bone conduction instead of air conduction due to the fact that it has to be impermeable. Then of course the Google glasses, they also are very well known now. They're not available, but they are working through bone conduction. Okay, so now I would like to show you what's out there in the market, what is available, which technology. Then we will talk about surgery, imaging. We will also talk about skin pressure, which is a very important factor, and appearance, and then also candidacy. So what is out there? There are many concepts regarding bone conduction. So there are passive non-implantable devices, and you may know hearing glasses. You may also know the Contact Mini, which is an interesting device, and there is a very new device which is available in Europe since some months, which is the Adhere device, which is a bone conduction hearing device, which is non-implantable. So the concept here is to have an external component which is vibrating mainly the skin, and thanks to the skin also the bone, and then all the mechanisms we have been talking about before will happen, right? Some of these devices require a strong pressure onto the skin. You all know the issues with hearing glasses, and these are very well known, and that's the reason also why not so many users are taking advantage of hearing glasses, due to the fact that there are complications on the skin. Then of course there are passive transcutaneous devices which are now implants. So there is a passive implant. What does that mean? This is an implant which has no energy source, no microphone, no moving parts which is directly applying energy to the skull, but the vibration comes from outside. The implant itself has only one objective, and this is to hold the external part in place. The external part is the one vibrating, and very similar to hearing glasses, energy is applied first to the skin and then to the bone, etc., etc. And we know the Baha systems. There are many versions out there, and for example the Sofono Alpha device. These are some devices which are using this concept. There are also, and these are very common, passive percutaneous implant. What does that mean? That the implant itself is screwed into the bone and is percutaneous. So that means that it goes through the skin. There will be an open wound constantly there. And to this screw abutment, an external device is applied, which is providing vibratory energy directly to the bone. And we know very well the devices which we're talking about, the Baha Connect and the Ponto. Only one device is out there in the market which adopts a completely new concept, and that's the active transcutaneous device. So there is an intact skin, it's a transcutaneous device, but the part which is moving is implanted. The part which is stimulating the bone, actively stimulating the bone, is implanting. And there's no big pressure onto the skin. It's not required to stimulate the skin with the bone bridge, because the energy and the signal is transferred through an external part in an electromagnetic way to the implant, and the implant then has the important task to stimulate the bone and provide a hearing impression through the mechanisms we have been talking about before. And this is the bone bridge. So the bone bridge is the only available device, the first of course, and the only still available on the market. So from this overview, what you can appreciate is that the only device which is active, so that means the power transmission is directly done by the implant itself to the bone, and which is transcutaneous, is the bone bridge. Right? So, and we think from Edel that this is the future of bone conduction implants. Okay, so let's have a closer look to transcutaneous implant technology, because transcutaneous implant technology are, I think, the only one which will survive. So no open wound, no complications due the wound which might be prone to infection, and there might be a variety of problems due to the fact that there is a persistent wound up there. So let's have a look at those subgroup of devices which are transcutaneous, and what we said before, there are passive devices and active devices. With the passive devices, the sound processor generates the stimulation outside onto the skin. There's of course an attenuation to the skin, and not every patient has the same thickness and the same consistency of the skin, and there might be also hair, which is very often, I would say this is the rule, right? There is hair and hair follicles which attenuate the signal and lower therefore the output. Then of course there are active devices, and the stimulation is done directly to the bone. It's applied to the bone directly, and the skin thickness, the hair follicles, and all what's between the audio processor and the implant itself, which is nicely embedded in bone and covered by skin, is not influencing what the output is. So that means basically that the outcome with these devices are more predictable. They have also the possibility of a higher output and a more efficient way of stimulating the bone. So it's all a question about comfort and benefit at the end for the patients. Comfort means that there is no pressure onto the skin. The pressure should not be too high. It should only be the amount needed in order to sustain the audio processor, but not more than that. And we know that with passive devices, pressure plays a very important role. The bigger the pressure, the more information can be sent to the bone. And due to the fact that we are going to stimulate the whole skull, these devices, these passive devices, needs to be big, to have a high mass, because they're shaking the whole skull. And therefore, of course, the comfort is reduced because of aesthetics. And due to the fact that the outcome is really dependent from the skin, the benefit is related to that, and therefore is not always given. With the active device, we said that before there is no need to have a high pressure of the external part to the implant. The pressure is actually very low. The audio processor can be as small and light as it can be, and the output is, the benefit is predictable. Patients are automatically wearing the device for a longer period of time during the day, and if you sum it up to the whole year, then you will see there's a big change in quality of life only due to the fact that patients are wearing it for a longer period of time. Okay, so let's have a look at the surgery. The surgery takes approximately 45 minutes. We have seen from the history that so many implants has been already implanted, and we can look back at many histories, and this is approximately what it takes to implant the Baha tract. So it's very short time frame, 45 minutes. This is a manufacturer's information. For the Alpha, for the Sophono device, Alpha 2 MPO, the time is similar, 45 minutes up to 60. Also something very reasonable. The bone bridge as well, we go from 30 to 60 minutes, and the Ponto is much shorter. The Ponto is 15 minutes. Actually, what the surgeon needs to do is a very small intervention, and the Ponto is placed. And the same is true also for the Baha Connect. A little bit longer, 30 minutes, but it's something, I think for all devices, we have reasonable time here. Imaging, very important. So, which devices are conditional to MRI imaging? The Baha Attract 4 is conditional at 1.5 Tesla. Of course, the external part has to be removed. The Alpha 2 MPO is approved for 3 Tesla. Also here the same. The external part has to be removed for all devices. The bone bridge as well is certified for conditional for 1.5 Tesla. The Ponto 3 Tesla, and the Baha Connect 1.5 Tesla. So this is something which is in common to many devices out there. It's very, very important. We have to add that for some of these devices, especially for the bone bridge, there is a shadow due to the implant itself, and this has to be considered by the surgeon and the experts as well. Let's talk about the skin pressure and appearance right now. This is a very, very important topic, and it will very often drive the decision of the patient which device they would like to have, to choose which implant they will then use. So for the Baha Attract, there is quite a strong skin pressure, because the idea is not only to hold the external part in place, but also to transfer energy in a very efficient way. It's an intact skin device, and we can see here the appearance of the device, right? So for the Alpha 2 MPO from Sefono, the skin pressure must be there as well, and that's also the reason why for these two devices, for the Baha Attract and the Alpha 2 MPO, there are some patients that might experience a skin issue, and they're documented and published, and I would recommend you to look into published paper showing complications due to the skin which are there because of the pressure these devices exert to the skin itself. The bone bridge, the audio processor is extremely light. We don't need to stimulate the whole skull with the external device. No, the only task the device has is to capture sound signal and send it to the internal part. That means that there are only electronic parts integrated into the audio processor. There are no mechanical parts which move, which make it, of course, very robust and very small and light. And therefore, the skin problems which we have seen, or surgeons and experts have seen in the clinics, are extremely reduced, and they're very similar to the ones you see for cochlear implants. Then, with the percutaneous device, of course, there is no skin pressure there, but there's the open wound of the implant, and this is true for the Ponto as well as for the Baha Connect 4. No skin pressure, but an open wound. And you can see also from the aesthetics and the appearance that they are quite massive and important. Why? Because they shake the whole skull, and they need mass and volume to do that. So from data we collected from the Osseo conference in 2013, we know what the skin pressure is for the Baha Attract, for example, and this is manufacturer's information, and we know that it's 4 times higher than with the audio processor of the bone bridge. And this is a very, very important information, because it really affects then the statistics regarding problems and issues with the skin, which are a minimum with the bone bridge, and it's not like that with other devices. And of course, like we said before, it's all about comfort and benefit, of course, but comfort is very important as well. And we see that both factors, comfort as well as the nice output, lead to a longer wearing time of the bone bridge in comparison to other devices. And also these are data which I show from the manufacturer. 3.5 hours more aided hearing time per day, and that means 1,250 more aided hours per year. Very important information. Candidacy. Well, let's have a look. The hearing loss types are, of course, mixed hearing loss, conductive hearing loss, and then we will talk about single-side deafness. And for the mixed hearing loss type, we need high power output. And the devices which are offering that are either the percutaneous devices or the active and transcutaneous device, the bone bridge. For the conductive hearing loss, we have more options. In addition to these 3 devices I already mentioned, there is the Sefono as well as the Baha Attract. For single-side deafness, all these devices can be used. They are approved for all of it. Let's now talk about the bone bridge a little bit more in detail. The first bone bridge has been implanted in 2011. Why is that important? Because we maybe can now look back had many years of experience. We know the surgery very well. We know the audiological outcome very well. There have been many publications published already for your reference regarding not only the different surgical techniques, but also the outcomes in these three groups: the mixed, the conductive, and SST. We got the CE approval for adults in 2012, and this is also the year where we got the approval for children above 5 years of age. In 2014, the lifts have been approved, which allows the surgeon to be faster during surgeries, not needed to have deep recess drilled out to allocate the bone bridge anymore. The BCI lifts, elevates the device a little bit so that the surgery is mainly faster. And we got the CE, the approval for children. So the first child was implanted in 2012, and we got the approval for children above 5 years in 2014. And then, of course, the audio processor, the new generation for the bone bridge came out in 2015, and the medal is an innovator, not only regarding the implants, but also the audio processors and the technology integrated in these devices. So there is a nice video which we will attach to the materials you can download, which is a video showing you how the bone bridge works. It's a very nice one. If you would like to have a look at that, it really explains in detail the most important concept. I encourage you to have a look at it. So the bone bridge system consists of a magnet. This magnet holds the external part in place. There is a coil which captures the energy needed for the transducer, we will see in a minute, to apply energy, to apply vibration to the skull, as well as the signal, the sound signal. This is then now delivered to the demodulator, and from the demodulator we will have a look now at the transducer. The transducer itself has two wings, and these two wings are needed to fix the FMT, the floating mass transducer, or transducer if you prefer, onto the surface of the skull in a very nice and a nice way, which holds the whole implant in place. So no further fixation is needed. Then, of course, the audio processor, which is applied from outside, I remember it's an intact skin over the implant, is then stimulating the implant itself, the coil. Of course, there's also the Samba available. This is the next generation waiting for you. So it's important also to notice that the dimensions of the bone bridge, the most important information I would like to give you is the depth, which is 8.7 millimeters, and this recess has to be drilled in order to apply the bone bridge in a correct way. But thanks to the lifts we have been talking about, the recess can be not that deep anymore, does not need to be that deep anymore. The audio processor has a dual microphone option, a very powerful signal processing, a very wide frequency range, and this is very important. This has been important since the beginning, not only for bone conduction devices, but also for middle ear implants in general. It's very important to provide a very wide frequency range in order to improve speech intelligibility in noise. The battery life is approximately 6 days. Patients, users can choose many colors, and there are many different magnet strengths which can be individually adapted and chosen by the patient. So what are the advantages of the bone bridge? Again, it's a transcutaneous technology. The transducer is directly driving the bone, and it's very efficient, highly efficient. One battery, one small 678 battery will last for 6 days, and that means that the transducer or the whole system has to be very, very efficient, and the complication rate are very low. But again, the most important advantages are that the bone bridge is comfortable and provides a high benefit to the patient. The magnets integrated into the system, they are force neutral, so as soon as they are positioned into an electromagnetic field, they will not move. The bone bridge can withstand MRI torques and forks up to 1.5 Tesla and has been certified for that. And there will be, like we said before, an artifact area around the implant. The audio processor can be discreetly worn under the hair, and it's quite invisible when the hair is quite long. The implant is covered by skin. There is no permanent wound care. The maintenance of this device is very, very low. We also know that from publications and from the statistics that there's a very little risk of infection, of skin irritation, also due to the fact that the pressure onto the skin is very, very small. That's the reason why medical complications after surgery are extremely low. And here I would encourage you to have a look at the publications which are out there. What is the indication range now for the bone bridge? Well, it is possible for you to find a good solution for a patient suffering from conductive as well as from mixed hearing loss, down to 45 dB for the bone conduction. And then, of course, a single-sided sensorineural deafness, where the contralateral ear is normal. AC should be better than 20 dB or equal, not worse. And then the affected ear, the implanted ear, should have a severe deafness, 70 dB and worse. So the indication range, the portfolio for the bone bridge ranges from mixed hearing loss to conductive and single-sided deafness, and represents a very, very good solution whenever you have a persistent air-bone gap of at least 30 dB. We know from studies that when the air-bone gap is smaller than that, in some frequencies, hearing aids might also be a very good solution. But whenever the air-bone gap is bigger than that, independently now from the bone conduction is the way to go. You will achieve a much better outcome for your patient if you use any bone conduction device. And also there are publications out there from Flynn, for example, and others, which demonstrate that very nicely. But the nice thing is that you can really test that with a conventional hearing aid first, if possible, if applicable, if the patient has an external auditory canal, and of course then also with bone conduction devices. So finally, I would like to say that the bone bridge is the first and active transcutaneous bone conduction implant system, and it's still the only one available on the market. It has been implanted now since 2011 in over 600 clinics worldwide, and it's very, very reliable because, of course, we integrated all the knowledge, all the know-how of cochlear implants, middle ear implants, and so on and so on. Last but not least, I would like to give you some information about the Contact Mini, which is a bone conduction hearing system which young kids can try out and use before they get implanted with the bone bridge. So you can see it here in the picture. It's a digital miniature bone conduction hearing system. It offers different wearing options. 2 sizes of head circlets are available, and different sized headbands you can use. And of course you can use it monoraily as well as binarily. So this is another picture of a patient, of a user wearing it. It can be used by toddlers or children who are too young to be implanted with the bone bridge, or do not have the sufficient anatomy to place the transducer. Of course, with a CT scan you can see whether that's the case or not. If the kit is much too small, then we have to wait a little bit. But there are many kits out there implanted with the bone bridge and bone bridge users. This device bridges the time until when the user can then be implanted with a bone bridge. So in summary, I would like to say that bone conduction and bone transmission of sound to the inner ear is a very effective way of providing hearing for patients which have a conductive hearing loss, maybe also in combination with a sensorineural hearing loss or mixed hearing loss, bone conduction is very effective. It has been used since so many years right now in a very effective way. But the most efficient way to stimulate the bone is of an active implant, an intact skin device, which offers a very low complication rate, and which is the bone bridge. The bone bridge is the only one which is active and transcutaneous. It's very reliable. We know that because we can now look back at so many years of experience. Is MRI compatible? It is cosmetically very appealing, and also regarding the audio processor. And this is very important because it contributes to comfort, and as I mentioned, the pressure onto the skin is extremely low, so that patients don't even are reminded of this pressure that they're wearing a device at all. And this is also contributing, of course, to the jump in quality of life. And then, of course, there's the Contact Mini, which is a bone conduction implant, which can be used before the kids get implanted. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found this presentation interesting. Thank you.